Okay, so let's just take this opportunity for the August 24th, 2022 City of Huntington Woods Historic District Commission. This is a special meeting, and according to my clock, it's 7:34. And I think this is good. We just have, obviously, the Schmier residents, and I think we know the drill. So just real quick, there is Roger's Rules of Orders. It's in here. I just would rather have it. We each have a place where we can talk. If we could just sort of try to do that. I tend to be pretty liberal about that, but if we're getting a lot of point to point, I'll just kind of close participation. We'll get a little more formal that way. And we all have perspectives, just everybody in general. Let's just be respectful. We all have different opinions, and that's great. And we'll make this work. So please,
we don't want to come back again. We've had enough rain.
You've had enough. Just remember, again, I know it's kind of difficult. You have a crowd tonight, but you can always use the podium microphone, but we would appreciate it if you could speak into the microphone. It does help keep record, and as I'm not doing that, so I got to move over to and remind myself. And just when you do approach the mic, just appreciate if you state your full name for the first time, just so we know who's speaking.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Jim Schmier. I want to thank all you guys for showing up again. Appreciate your time, especially in these waning, nice days, maybe of summer. Actually, over the last 3 weeks, there were certainly some objections last time. And actually, it was for us, for me, I spent some time really, maybe a crash course in architecture of sorts and the history of the architecture that we bought into. And as such, we have modified a couple of things that we're thinking of doing. I think, Mr. LeBeau, in talking about the door, I think he's right. We're going to opt and go for a wood door that's probably more appropriate than what is even in there now. And again, I brought you a picture of sort of what I anticipate.
So just so everybody knows, you should have received a copy.
I also looked into actually restoring the windows. I called seven different companies. 5 never called me back. One of them said, call me in a couple years. One of them actually did come out, but he looked and he thought it was interesting, but he never called us back. And we're in the process of getting the porch, needs brickwork, and we're having that done. And anecdotally, our brick guys said, there are 3 or 4 guys in Detroit who do this stuff in this area, and you might be waiting 2 or 3 or 4 years for a complete restoration of your windows. So anyway, I think, what we propose in that picture of the Anderson window, it's a great looking window. It's certainly not going to change the look of the house. I don't think anybody will know what they are from the distance. They will see them, and I think the picture, although it's me rendering on Photoshop, I think it gives an idea of what I would like to do, including even the paint color. As I say, we're sort of matching the tan that's in the back. And I went with the one restorer guy who came did say those were the original windows that are still in the garage in the back, and probably the original paint, which is sort of that tan color as opposed to white. And in looking at the history, tan was sort of the color, or certainly earthy tones was what was used. The other thing that Brett pointed out this evening, which I didn't know, those are actually replacement windows for the original windows, as it turns out. So by installing the Andersons, we will actually gain window space rather than lose it, because not only do we get to take the storms off, but we will have actually more window than we had before. Anyway, as I say, I think, the Anderson is, again, it maintains the image of the house, but it allows us also to live in the house. It's energy efficient. And I think the guy who can really speak to Anderson is my brother David, and I'll let him talk.
I'm the senior design consultant for Renewal by Anderson. I'm also Jim's brother. Don't hold that against me, please. So I'm just going to talk for a second about the material itself. What you have there are examples of what you can do with wood windows. The sample that is painted is original wood from a house that I actually got out of the DePetris' house in Ferndale. House was built in 27, not much different from my brother's and my sister-in-law's house. And that wood is about 300 years old, and you can tell because if you hold it, it's super dense. It's like steel. You get it out of forests, it's pine, but it's super, super dense, and it's hard as steel, and it will never rot. Now the problem is that other piece that's sitting on top of that little I-beam thing, that's the wood that we get today. We get it out of farms, there's steroids in the soil, growth hormones, get it to grow real fast, it's very porous. That is wood that you have to paint literally every single year if you want to maintain the wood, because otherwise it'll rot very quickly if it gets moist. So one solution is that stuff that's in that gentleman's and Jeff's left hand right now, which is they clad the wood to try to protect it. The problem with that is that moisture still gets in between the wood and the aluminum skin, and it rots. Plus the aluminum, of course, does not respect the integrity of this design of this home here. So what Andersen did 35 years ago is they invented a material, created a material that would be wood but didn't have the problems of wood, which is rot, and that's that last piece, that little I-beam. It's a wood composite. So that's wood combined with virgin polymers. So you get the benefit of wood, which is very rigid, it's very dense. At the same time, it can never rot, unlike vinyl windows or plastic windows. Those are the cheapest windows out there, which expand and contract, and they have the big wide frames. It never does that, it never changes shape, and on the outside is a coating. So it's a wood product that resists all of the problems of wood. And the idea is to have structurally something very strong that can support 2 panes of glass, because the other thing about these original windows, as beautiful as they are, they will only support, at that time, a single pane of glass. It's not thermal glass, which is 2 panes, it's a single pane of glass. Problem there is the only way to make that window energy efficient is to put a storm window on the outside. That blocks the view of the original windows. The only storm windows that you can really get these days are aluminum, and you lose a lot of glass that covers a lot of the original window. And I think it's particularly unattractive myself. So I'd like to show you guys an actual window. I've got a sample here. Before I do that, are there any questions about the material, about what we did, what we do? And that's product is unique to Renewal by Andersen. We're a division of the Andersen Window Company. It's the largest window company in the world. Invented that 35 years ago because of all the problems everybody was having with wood windows. So that's a double hung window, same design that we were putting on Jim and Alana's house. On the outside are those grills, and those are actually physical, and those are made out of the same composite. The material itself is all composite, and it's got the most energy efficient glass on the market right now. Questions about it? Thoughts? Does it look original? Does it look any different than, what's that?
Maybe they'd like to open it closer.
Sure. Come take a test drive, as we say. I do this every day, 3 times a day. I'm in 3 houses a day. Do you want to try it? No? I do. I'll show you very briefly.
I think maybe a question to ask at this point is how, if you're working with that window, how do you install them in the opening that you create when you take the old windows out? and the question in particular has to do with the space between the edge of the window unit and the brick opening.
So that's a really good question. With an historic home, typically it's going to be wet plaster walls inside, and then there's going to be a trim around the windows. It's called casing, and that's typically made out of oak. And with a replacement window for a home like that, when you take out the old window, what it leaves is there's a pocket there with the old ropes and the pulleys in it. So you remove all of the ropes, you remove the pulleys, and then you're going to fill that gap. There's a small cavity there. You're going to fill it with high R-value insulation, and then put the new windows inside that pocket. If you were to try to take that interior casing off and try to get down to the original opening, which are the studs, that plaster that's around there is going to start to crumble, and there's very little way. There's a couple of people in Detroit who will restore that. Very difficult to find, and they are years out.
No, actually, I'm not asking about the interior, I'm asking about the exterior.
Yeah. So on the outside, there's a couple of choices. There's something around there called brick mold, which is wood, if you're familiar with that. And typically, in an older house, what we do is because that's wood and that's also rotting, typically, or needs to be painted. One of the big problems with painting wood windows is you don't just paint them once. You paint them over and over again, and what happens is that paint builds up. It's very difficult to keep a sharp line when you got 20 coats of paint on there, and that's what we're seeing here. So they look real raggedy. This material, because you never paint it, it retains those sharp lines. So it looks clean, it looks new, literally forever. So that brick mold is wood as well, and that typically is rotted. So what we're going to do is cover that with aluminum cladding, and I have some pictures we can show you of that, if you would like. If somebody wants to restore the original brick mold, they can do that by scraping, filling it with Bondo, sanding it, painting it, primer, paint, but then you will have to paint it multiple times.
Okay, so right now, what you're talking about is taking out the old windows, putting in the new windows, and filling the gap between the new window casing and the brick with aluminum, just sheet aluminum, right?
Actually, what it is, Jeff, is that we're going to stuff, there's going to be a small cavity there with 1/16 of an inch. So we bring out, when it's time to do the project, we bring out a master installer and we measure within 1/16 of an inch of the rough opening. So we're going to stuff that with high R value insulation, we're going to fill it with low expansion foam. Then there is a slight gap, as I said, 1/16 of an inch before the brick mold starts. And then what we'll do is we'll cover that 1/16 inch gap and the brick mold itself with aluminum cladding. That's the same color as the window.
And it's just going to be flat?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not gonna lose, I mean, we have aluminum siding now, as you know, all around those windows. I don't know if we're gonna lose any more than we've already have there. And potentially, if you're right, there's actually another brick molding under there potentially from the original windows.
I think that at this point, I'd like to introduce Brett Mahaffey from our office, who you met the last time, because he is going to show you we're actually going to gain quite a bit of glass by doing this, as opposed to losing glass for a couple of reasons. Brett, do you want to? Sure.
Can I
Well, let me-
ask one additional question?
Yes.
The panes, at least at the upper level, were 8. This shows 4. In the window that you'll be putting in, it will have 8.
Yeah, so this is just a sample. So I'm
Okay.
a sales guy,
All right.
and I carry this around to people's homes, take them inside. So
Just
Well,
one.
they're all gonna be the same number as they are
Okay.
now. I mean, the ones in the back actually are 3, some of
Yeah,
them.
3/3s, and then some of them are 4
Fours,
or 4,
right.
depends on.
Is it?
The bedrooms are 4s.
I'm not worried about
yeah, so we're going to duplicate it's called the grill pattern, and we'll duplicate that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, to go into what Jeff was talking about, I'm not entirely clear on it. My house was also built in 1927, got double hung windows, sash cords and sashways. I have replaced those myself. So I'm familiar with, the interior workings and the pockets for the sashway. I'm not clear here, is the lift mechanism going to fit within the sashway pocket? Or is that entire unit going to fit within the existing opening?
Fits within the existing opening. As I was mentioning, we're going to take out the weights and the pulleys. Oftentimes, those are gone anyway. The cords have been clipped because it's just a cotton piece of rope. Oftentimes, you can't find it. It's fallen within the pocket. The weights are down there. You probably experienced that. On this window, I'll show you how what the mechanism is. So, I'm not sure if the microphone can pick me up.
It can't. So could I ask, is there a way to bring that maybe back here? Because he can't get it on the camera either. There you go, Steve, if you want.
Go here, or would you like me to come back?
If that camera or one of those two cameras just needs to pick up what you're doing, so I'm gonna go with it's gonna be that camera.
Okay.
So,
There you go.
thank
This-
you, perfect.
So as you can see on the side here, this metal, that's covering up the spring system. So nobody uses weights and pulleys anymore, inefficient system. So we use the spring system. Ours is located in the sash as opposed to in the frame of the window. The purpose of that is so that we, when it's in the frame of the window, this has to be much wider. Our goal was just to minimize any glass loss, so we put it in the frame of the window here, in the sash, in the sash. It's all spring-loaded. And that's unique to Anderson. No other manufacturer does that. Everybody else puts it in the frame of the window versus the sash. Does that answer the question?
Mr. Chair, can I ask, I'm gonna just ask a question, because rather than go into the whole thing, a lot of the concern last time was the dimensions of the rails and stiles and the dimensions of the mutton bars for what's there and what you're proposing. Is there a possibility you could address that for the board?
Yeah, I'm gonna let, I think you got, or Brett, did you get measurements?
Yep, I
Brett's
have.
gonna talk to that, because he did get measurements, and he'll show you what the comparison is. In addition to the storm windows that are currently on the windows, and by removing those and going with thermal glass, 2 panes of glass, and how we can eliminate those storm windows.
This actually is a cutout of what the window would be with the storm currently. I mean, this is us looking out on the bottom corner, this is what we would see. And when you hold it against that window,
So my name is Brett. I'm with Renewal by Anderson. You guys met me last time. So the questions Hank asked in here, David brought it up. This will sit on top of the brick molded opening. You know, there'll be a 1/16 of an inch gap to insulate it and all of that. So we measured from the top of the brick mold to the top of the storm window, and that's what this represents, the 4 1/4 inches. I don't know if it's easier to put it in front of it or behind it. But as you can
It
see,
shows the
the
difference.
side is, it's just a little bit, our window comes out just a tiny bit on the side, but on the bottom, it's a good solid, maybe an inch, half inch
gain an inch.
on the bottom. And that's from sitting on top of the brick mold, the sight lines from the storm window. And then, this is just the bottom corner. I can show you real quick on the top. I don't know if put this in front or behind, but, so this would be, you know, the top of the brick mold, the window would sit in that pocket.
Let's do it from the outside. So that's the exterior of the window.
So their storm window currently comes to here, so we lose maybe a half inch on the top here. Yeah, this is top. And inside, it's almost the same. I don't know if the camera needs to see that. But that's the measurements from the brick mold. You still have you still have the brick mold. But with the storm window, that's where the storm would come, the wood.
So I think this will, I'll talk in a moment. I'm hoping this will get to the dimensional thing that we've been trying to really get to. So you gave us a picture, right here, right? Where you gave us the aluminum, right? 2
Yes.
3/4 on the aluminum, then we get to the sash. So this is where the rubber meets the road. This is what we're trying to get to.
Yeah,
So that broken piece of aluminum, when that gets installed, does that go there?
correct.
Or does it go there?
Nope, it goes inside this.
Okay, so based upon my higher mathematical abilities, hang on, that was a 3-inch total face, and then we take a half an inch, so we have a 2.5-inch face.
Yep.
Okay, exposure. So this is why I was asking for these dimensions, just so you know. So I know it sounds a little fussy, but that, to me, this is better, because this is what the point I was trying to get to. So if you're gonna, your existing window was what right here? The total exposure on the sash, not the storm? You had it in your last packet.
Okay.
Should be 3 1/8, right, Brett?
No, it's- Your existing window was less than that, but I'll find it, it's
Okay.
right? Yeah, so you had the existing window picture? Yep, so what I'm saying is the insulation, so when we look at this picture where they're measuring the aluminum, you're not gonna see this. You're actually installing the aluminum right here, okay? And that's a big difference to me, just because the 3 inches versus 2.5, and then the existing, we're trying to compare sight lines to existing windows. That's why I asked for the dimensions last time, because this is just important. I gotta find where you had, this was not numbered. If someone can help me get to the picture, I would really love it. I know it's in here. Here we go. So you had 2 inches. So we're only a half-inch difference. I guess that was the reason I wanted to do it. So it's a difference. If you're gonna stack this and then do shim spaces, then my argument would be you're losing glass to the brick mold. Because, but this is what we were driving at, because that really is, we're talking about a half an inch on each side, total inch less glass. Does everybody get that?
Yeah, I think that I'm going to come back to the question I was asking before, which is, I gather because of the way the windows were originally built, you have that wooden, we're calling it a wood, it's a wood trim, but we're calling it brick mold.
Yeah.
But it's actually wood on the outside, right? And that is the space between the actual brick, the masonry, and the edge of the window unit, correct?
Frame and the window,
Right.
not the sash.
Right. And so, in installing the new windows, as I'm understanding it correctly, the coil, the coil basically, is going to be cut so that it'll be kind of like a U shape in profile.
L-shape.
L-shape, okay, L-shape, with part of it being tucked into that seam
Correct.
that Chris was just pointing to, and then going laterally across, right, and then going laterally across to cover the brick mold.
To die into the brick. So the brick is actually then, right, keep your trim up there for me. Your brick is actually then butts in like that.
Exactly. Now, so
Then we
here's,
have 2 and 3/4 inch exposure on that piece.
that's what I was wondering.
And so the difference is this little piece, my finger on it right, this little piece right here is the only difference.
Mhm.
Okay, so the sash frame itself.
No, I
do the
understand,
math, it's actually the same.
I understand
I'm just trying to make sure everybody gets what I'm driving.
oh, okay.
Okay.
So the aluminum, that little L-shaped aluminum that you're holding up will be about 2 3/4 of an inch wide and just go straight across, correct?
Yes.
Okay, to
So
the brick.
just like this, right?
Yeah,
You're kind of replicating that, right?
Yes.
2 3/4, and that's gonna die into that gash there.
correct, because we're gonna sit right in the same area. I put these pictures, these were new pictures that we took. Normally brick mold's 2 inches wide or 2.5 inches wide. This isn't. For whatever reason, you can see there's a gap, and that's what all these bugs and everything are in there, which is weird.
I've got a question to ask you.
Yeah.
I visited the property, it was over the weekend. I did ring the bell, no one answered.
That's because the bell wasn't working. You made a ring from the outside, but you couldn't hear it on the inside.
Well, I
And
bought
I
a mouse.
knocked on the door, anyways, I
That's
walked.
why we weren't there, we weren't
It
there.
didn't look like anybody was home, but I know we can go onto the property, look at the house, but I did want to, inform you that I was, but, I took liberty, since you mentioned the garage last time, and you had, you thought the original windows, and I could take some pictures of the, windows on the garage, which appear to be in fairly good shape, the sound right and everything. Is that what the window looks like when you strip off all that, storm and,
Honestly, I couldn't
like
tell
that
you
rock
or not.
picture you
Yeah.
showed me?
Yeah, I'm not sure because it's all coiled.
Similar style window, what was originally, in there.
The brick, that looks like traditional brick mold, which isn't what this is. This brick mold here is very different. It's usually not this detailed, or not even detailed,
Okay.
but.
So that is accurate, the only difference is this would be flat instead of that.
Okay, so right now, the windows look like this, and I do think that they're very, very kind of offensive with the storms covering them. And when I think that it may have used to look like this, and now it looks like this, there's a pretty substantial difference. Will removal of the storms and the installation of these windows return the window into the brick, where you have the window now visibly behind the brick opening like this is?
It'll be closer.
Like here you have like about 2 inches of brick or so.
Why don't you look at here?
So it'd be an installation that looks similar to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's accurate.
Mr. Chair, could I ask that whatever he's showing one member, he shows all, please?
Oh, well, I took a picture of the garage window. And I also took a
Your
picture.
picture flipped, and I don't remember how to flip that to the other one, because we don't want that one.
Did you
That
notice the
doesn't-
beams under the garage?
What's that?
Did you notice
Where's
the
that
joists
picture
that
in
are
the
exposed?
Yes, yes.
I think
And
he
those
took
probably
them.
still exist.
He went to the property.
went to the
Oh, those are his pictures.
Everywhere.
Yeah, okay.
It was actually the
amazing.
beadboard underneath the garage, and it looked like beadboard that was painted.
Beautiful.
It's far much more beautiful than the aluminum side.
Oh, the aluminum, if I could afford to, I shudder to wonder what's really under all that aluminum.
It was really, I did look at the garage, and what's
Garage, is
interesting,
that
the
the
garage
We
is
ask that you speak into the microphones if you're gonna talk.
The garage has been exposed to all the elements, and probably what's ruined those windows quicker than anything was covering them with all that
This is not that
aluminum.
house, this is another house that I did, and that's just what I've finished.
And it's trapped all that moisture in there. And the same thing probably with that beadboard that's covered under the eaves.
Well, and plus, you know, the windows at the garage there are, again, are a bit sheltered with the overhangs. See, especially on the sides, and, you know what I mean, they're much more exposed.
Well,
Can I ask another question about coming back to the metal that'll be used to cover the space between the edge of the frame? So, Jim, if I'm remembering correctly, your intent is to have the bronze-colored window units, that's what we'll see from the outside, and then that little filler that's going to go all around is the one that's going to be painted this sort of putty color.
That was our intent. However, as you know, I redid the door this week on the side door, and that's all one color, and I'm sort of liking it now as well.
So,
The door and the frame are now the same color.
so are you thinking about making the windows then the putty color?
Yes, I was thinking, again, I haven't gone there, but that was, but then again, I like the picture that I showed you, the two panel. I kind of like that look. Just looking at it, I think it's pretty.
Yeah, I mean, this is not, I'm not sure this is actually within our purview, but I spent about an hour looking at paint schemes for Craftsman bungalows historically. And what I was seeing, because I never noticed this before, but in some of the examples, the window units are dark, and then the trim around them is lighter. It's a little hard to tell from those old magazine illustrations what they are. Although I would say that the average, it seems to me, is that they're all light, meaning that the metal units, yeah, so that's right. This is, I'm going to just turn this around so you can see the sort of the dark, metal units, and then the trim around it is lighter. And then but I saw also plenty of examples. I would say probably more than half were all lighter. Of what color exactly is hard to say, but it was sort of lighter. Okay.
I mean, even the wood door, quite frankly, that, as I've been looking at pictures, most of the doors are painted, and they're not really, they don't show the wood. Oftentimes the door is the same
That's correct.
color.
That's correct. I mean, the example that you used, for your little illustration, which shows the natural wood color, I couldn't find any examples that look like that. I think probably was, I know you visited a lot of Frank Lloyd Wright buildings. I have too. And quite often when they have those wood doors, which he used a lot, but they would just be stained dark. So it almost looked like it was painted, but it really wasn't. But anyway.
But I kind of like the look, but it's not probably typical or traditional.
Right.
What I'm showing there, I recognize that.
Right. So I just have one other question, and this is, I guess it's kind of heuristic in a way. That little L-shaped piece of metal, is it possible for you, if you wanted to create a step in there to sort of replicate the look of a brick molding, to actually create a step? In other words, instead of it just having be a flat L, have it return once, maybe by a quarter of an inch or half an inch or something?
Yeah, the brake is on the truck, so that's bent on the truck. It's custom for every window, so I'm not sure about that. I've done probably 1,000 projects, and we've never done that, but it's certainly something that we could check if they could add another step. It's called a return.
Yeah.
So we could do a separate return. We can certainly ask the question.
It's a fine point, but in a lot of those older windows, what the brick mold gave as a sort of delicacy to that fenestration, that little turn there. Well, that's it for me in terms of questions right now.
So just because we thank you for the dialogue, but I just want to make sure that we never let you finish. So if there's any other information, it was your time to present. I appreciate that we kind of got the dialogue going, but I wanted to make sure that if you have anything else you'd like to cover, that the floor is technically yours right now.
Do you guys have any more questions?
Well, right now, I just want to make sure I gave you an opportunity, and then we'll kind of,
I was gonna say, if you give me a minute, I can try to reach out to one of our technicians and ask the question if we can add a return to the coil. So I'll just step outside and see if I can reach somebody, so I may have an answer for you in a minute.
Okay.
so I think we can just flip it over to Hank. Do you have anything that you'd like to add?
At this point, I'm seeing this other information for the first time as you are right now, so there wasn't any other chance to review it. But I will tell you that the information that's come up in the samples and everything should be very helpful in helping guide you towards a decision. Other than that, again, just a reminder that the color really is not something that the HDC typically gets into regulate. Jeff's pretty much spot on with his color choices and his information with that, though. So, to the extent that helps anybody make a decision as to color, that's great. But other than that, we really don't have anything to add that we didn't discuss last meeting.
So I'm just going to turn it over to us up here. So, Mr. Jenks, why don't you hop in?
Yeah, it seems to me like the volume of glass is similar, and the dimensions are similar. I would be most concerned on the street side as opposed to the sides or the back. And as long as the patterning matches, I think actually without storms at the front, it would be a better presentation, and at the same time would be more energy efficient, which is not historically required, but is contemporarily required.
Perfect. Mark?
Yeah, I would like to go back to one thing that Mr. Schmier said that I think we haven't talked about, that I think would be very important. You said that the existing windows in the house are themselves replacements, they're not original, is that correct?
Again, Brett, this picture suggests that these, at some point over the 100 years, the original windows were replaced by these windows. And again, showing, I guess,
I believe Hank passed out these picture packets to you guys all, to all of you guys. So this is the second page. These are two different windows that we pulled the trim back on. I believe, was it Stephen, you had the garage window picture?
Yeah.
So you can see the brick mold is attached to the window on the garage, but there's like a ½ inch gap between the brick mold, which is shorter than normal, and the window itself, and that's all filled with all the, I have no idea, I've never seen anything like that. It's just weird how it's not connected to the brick mold. And you can see, and this is a different window, same thing, you can see a ½ inch, and you can actually see the window more, the edge of the window more than the other one. I don't know how that's like that because of the weight and rope pockets. I can't rip all the metal off to give you more. We just pulled it back more. Because whoever flashed these, they didn't caulk it to the brick. So like somebody brought up, moisture and stuff inside of there. Yeah, that's why all these bugs loved it, obviously. So
I was at the deed office actually. I was at the courthouse today. I was at the deed office and I stopped in because we were looking at the blueprints, if you remember. And apparently the assessor's office might have pictures of this house going back many, many years that they're looking for. Because I was curious to see what was going on back, if they had anything. Their computerized stuff only goes back to 1948, I believe, at this stage. So somebody was going to go look through some of the books.
The reason I ask that is because in part of the standards indicate that changes that have been made to a property that have taken on historical importance in their own right become important. Now, if the windows were replaced, like say 20 years ago, then they're not significant anyway. They have no historical significance. So that's why I wonder if you know when the windows were replaced, or even from a standpoint of expertise, you could estimate whether
when I took out the door, I had to remove the aluminum from the door, and all the wood was rotten, and I took stuff out, and there were newspapers there from 1967, if that means anything. So I have no idea. I mean, there's obviously been a lot of modifications to this house over 96 years, or 94 years.
Yeah, you know, we wanna keep the house original if it is original, but if it's not original, then that makes a big difference.
I agree. I think actually, as I say, I think what we're proposing, and I think the rendering that we did, you know, moves this house into the next century and preserves the architecture, and no one is not going to say this is a fine example of a craftsman house. And in fact, we'll be able to say this is a fine example of a craftsman house because we've preserved it and I think made it and improved it. Right now, again, if you were to walk up the stairs with all this rain, I mean, on the wall, there's some bubbling going on where water is leaking from one of the windows up there. That needs to be arrested. That needs to be stopped. And I think what we're proposing will do it, and as I say, provide a good example of this architecture going forward, long after I'm not certainly. Well,
Anything else, Mark?
No, that's,
Mikhail?
I'm okay with the glass and the dimension. The only thing I would like, if it's possible, like Jeff mentioned, to do the return so it will look the same. But that's all.
Anything else? All set. Perfect, yeah.
No, I don't have any other questions. I mean, I think in general, I endorse the plan. I do have that one question about the return. I'll be interested to hear about that, just because I think that that flat metal, it kind of modernizes it in a way that you don't quite want to do. And so if it's possible to do that extra return, I think that would be great. That would be just a nice, sufficient to, yeah. Yeah. And we talked about the front door. I think that's a big improvement. That's really absolutely the right step. And, and then there are just the issues of the colors, which, you guys are going to have to figure out. That's it for me.
Great, thank you. Steve?
After visiting the property and observing the current windows with the storm windows on them, I think that this is going to be a tremendous improvement and return it back to a look far closer to the original look than what we see right now. And I think that it's a good project.
Thank you. Were you able to find out about the return?
Yes, so we do have a form with our bending machine that can put a little crimp in it. So it does give you a little detail that you're looking for. The downside is that in the corners where it's mitered, it doesn't lay as flat. And so Larry Jones, one of our installation managers, what his characterization was, yeah, you can get it, this part will look more interesting or more detailed, but when you get to the corners, it's not quite as good as when everything lays flat. So that's the sacrifice. But it can be done. Can be done.
Just a couple comments from me. I know that I asked for some additional detail, but I think, and it was more specific to the installation because I wanted to, in my opinion, once you clarified that, it sort of showed that the glass to frame ratio was really more consistent with the historic. So I appreciate the willingness to bring that detail. The only other question I had is just as I see you have two mutton grills. I would imagine you're going with the narrow one, the 3/4. Is that correct?
That was the intent, but
Okay. No, I think that's more consistent. I don't know what the dimensions are on the existing, but I think that's more appropriate, so I would encourage that. I don't know if you have a dimension on the existing, but I'm sure it's pretty darn close.
It's 7/8.
So that's good. I'd rather go for that than the bigger. And then I think we did last time confirm that you're doing the shadow bar. Is that correct on the grills? My questions are answered. The door, front door, yes, much better improvement, so thank you.
Mr. Chair, since you have two things before you with the door and the windows, you can take them either together or separately, whichever is your pleasure.
we will see what happens with our motion. And right now, I'm just gonna, since we've sort of had a chance to talk through this and ask questions, I don't see any public participation, so I'm just going to close that right now. And I guess we have an opportunity here on the commission to put forth some motions and have some discussion about those motions. So I certainly would love to entertain a motion.
I would first make a motion to split the two issues into their own separate agendas. The door and then the window replacement.
And procedurally, do we have to have a second on that, Hank? And, or can it
If
just
you're
become
making
a
a motion,
motion?
you need the second and the vote.
Okay, so can
Second.
all in favor of splitting it into the door with the windows, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that has passed. So we're looking for two motions now.
Well, I'll move that the plan for the front door be approved as submitted. So we do that first? I guess we should do that first. Yeah, let's do that first.
By chance, can you mention any of the standards that might apply? That would just help me a little bit, and here you go. Give me a little cheat sheet.
Mr. Chair, just for another point here while he's looking for that, you may want to reference that the door material has gone from fiberglass to wood.
So I will also add another caveat, because I don't know, did we get an updated catalog cut of that? But the picture shows a craftsman-style door that is appropriate with the style of the house. I'll make that statement. And that it will be actually a wood door as part of that motion.
As presented in the photograph.
As presented in the photograph submitted, and Hank will have that for the record.
I think there's only one standard that applies specifically, and that would be standard number 6. Oh, no. Yes,
That will work, thank you.
yeah.
So we have a motion. Do we have, I'm sorry, I didn't hear, do we have a second to that
Yeah,
motion?
Jeff.
Jeff did, so I think we can just do this as a group. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So the motion for the door passes. So we now are entertaining a motion on the windows.
I'd make a motion for approval of the windows as presented for 26888 York, the Schmier residence, and that it meets standard 2, 3, 4, and 6. And I would comment that the brick mold be left to the discretion of the owners regarding the additional detail.
And Hank, I would like to ask one question, just because we don't have a drawing that shows the actual installation, but where the aluminum meets the window frame, can I let you handle that administratively? Because I don't have a detail, so that way,
Yes, you can
I'm
do
very
that.
happy as long as the aluminum goes in the crease that's on
You
there.
can do that, and I'm sure that they would be ecstatic to get me a drawing that replicates
Are you
that.
making an amendment to my motion?
Just a slight one, just to clarity, because I want it installed with that that face exposure.
I would accept that amendment.
Thank you so much. So
Do you have a second?
I'm just going to ask, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so all in favor of the
Just
motion?
one question.
Sure.
The material that will be clear will be glass.
Excuse me?
There's no
You'll be
plexiglass.
using all glass.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so we have this motion with the clarifications. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Your
Thank
motion
you.
passes.
Thank you.
We appreciate the extra detail. It was very helpful, so
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think you'll be happy.
I think you will be too, so enjoy.
We will be thrilled.
Mr. Chair,
didn't put it in that track, I don't think it was.
Mr. Chair, at this point, since this was a special meeting, there really is no other business, but you can anticipate a meeting in September. and at that point in time, we'll also go back to our administrative approvals.
Okay, so, since this is a special, I don't need to do a motion to close, we can just close?
You need a motion to adjourn.
Can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
We've got Jeff and
Second.
Mark is seconding, all in favor?
Aye.
8:19,
Yeah, but we have to
Hank.
make sure that it's safe to drink the cocktail.
8:19, Hank, for close, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.